Welcome back. Oh, you don't know who I am, huh? Well, this is kind of the way it is these days when you're going to the store. I never thought I could go to a bank with a mask on and not get arrested. But it's me. I'm here. So this is the huge controversy these days. We did some polls to figure out what types of masks people wore. And it was interesting to see how many people had access to N95s. And it was also interesting to see how many people wore masks all the time. And it was also interesting to see how many people thought they had to wear a mask, even if they were outside. In COVID, finally, we've all agreed that masks are necessary, no matter what the situation. And in particular, when you're in crowded spaces, they're critical. But which mask do you wear? Well, I'm here to help you with that and maybe kind of decipher some of this, because most of my life, 19 years, I spent wearing masks in and out of an OR, trying to protect patients from any of our germs going into the field, and at the same time protect us to some degree from germs coming back. So let's start at the beginning, right? There's various types of masks on offer, and the CDC has come to very clear terms with which mask is actually required for which particular user. If your risk of communicating disease is exceptionally high, which is potentially possible for any of us, then obviously you need to wear a mask. And guess what? That could be any of us, because you could be asymptomatic and still have COVID. But there's certain particular things which are very important to understand. The first is that each mask will protect you to a high degree from transmitting your own micro and macro droplets to the rest of the people around you. But not all the masks will protect you from incoming droplets or incoming particles, and that's where things change. So let's go through it, right? The simplest mask is not this one. This is actually farther up the chain, but it's a 2-layer cloth mask, which has good coverage of the face. And for this video, I'm going to go through the do's and the don'ts, because too often I'll see people wearing masks incorrectly, which absolutely serves no purpose whatsoever. And it's very clear that it's probably worse than wearing a mask at all by small margins. But let's go through them. This is a 2-layer cloth mask, and like it, this is another 2-layer cloth mask, and similarly, this is a 2-layer cloth mask. The benefit of these is they do protect you from expectorating or coughing up any of your particles and spreading them around the environment, because as we found with COVID, it's a 125 nanometer particle, and it will get to others through airborne approaches. And so these masks are critical for you to use when you're considering that. But the problem with these is they don't have 100% protection from inbound particles. And at best, depending on the type of cloth mask you're using, it's somewhere between 30 and 60%. You move up a layer and you add an extra layer of coating and a 3-layer mask, and you may get all the way up to 70%. But the problem with these masks is they have vents. And these are great for protecting you from inhaled particles. But the problem with these vents is when you exhale, you actually expectorate all the particles. And so in fact, these are more dangerous, and I would not recommend them with vents on them. So keep these away. Next is the surgical mask. The surgical mask is not equivalent to what we call an N95, but for much of my career, I used it to protect our patients from getting particles from us into the field, and thereby practice safe and very sterile surgery. And the data has shown that if you wear a mask in the operating room, the risk of wound infection goes down. But in this particular case with COVID, wearing this type of mask or any of these cloth masks protects you from infecting other users. And so this is critical. Now the surgical mask is good in many ways. And there's one thing I'm going to show you. It has this metal clasps. And so one critical feature of the mask is the ability to fit properly. And in the case of what we'll see, the N95, there's actually a fit test that they do according to the NIOSH standards or the CDC standards for people in hazardous environments. But the key to this is this metal strip allows the mask to fit snugly over your nose and protect any inhalation of particles. And then this thing stretches. It has pleats, and so it'll fit over your chin and provide pretty good protection. There's indeed a small gap on the side, so you got to buy a mask that fits properly, but that is something that's very important. Now, if you notice on these cloth masks, they have to be sized to your face. If you see with this one, it really only comes to my chin. And so it's going to move up and down. I've seen the funniest things on the roads, and I'll show you some pictures of it. But when a mask is like this, who's that protecting? You can still expectorate through your nose or blow out particles. And in fact, it was found that the nose and the turbinates is where they actually do the sampling for COVID when they do the studies for that in terms of the testing. And so you can imagine if your nose is free, you're definitely potentially putting out COVID things. So wearing it like this really doesn't help anyone. And when you have a loose fitting one without a band in it, which many of these cloth masks don't have, it tends to slip down and come over here. Having said that, these surgical masks and the N95s were in very short supply. And hence the CDC has unequivocally said that we should reserve the supplies we have for people at the highest risk, the people who are taking care of the patients or the frontline workers. And that's why they said that the N95s and the surgical masks were reserved for those populations. Now, if you do have a mask, and a cloth mask at that, don't wear it on your chin. I've seen that quite a bit. Doesn't make any sense to me because you're not doing anyone any services. And in fact, if anything, every time you drool, you're filling your mask of nasty stuff, and that mask is getting dirty. So for your purposes, it isn't a really good thing. Now, I've seen people take them off to talk on the phone and do other things, but I think you need to fight that, and you need to hold the phone closer to the side of your face, or alternatively hold it closer to your face with the mask on, because every time you break in technique, as we called it in the OR, and you move your mask up, down, or outside, you run the risk of transmitting particles. Finally, there's the idea of the N95 mask, which is specially formulated with pores which will filter out 95% of the particles, which are 100 to 300 nanometers, which is what you see COVID being 125 nanometers. This should do the top job in 95% of the cases with particulate matter. These were originally formulated for healthcare workers as well as hazardous areas where you had particulate debris. They also have N97 and N99 masks, which have higher degrees of filtration, and actually N100 masks, which are actually 99.7. But I wouldn't recommend these for just everyone. They are the best. There's no doubt about it. And I think if we didn't have shortages, this is the one I would recommend. Again, with these, there's a fit test. You have to fit them properly in order to make them work. So one goes above, one goes below, and then you make sure it's on your chin, and then you open this up and make sure your seal on your nose is tight. And with this, you can see all the way around I'm protected, which I didn't have on this surgical mask, and I didn't have on these, right? So what if you can't afford a mask, which is not an unrealistic question? It's very interesting that you ask that. A bandana or a sari or a piece of kapada, even if you fold it on itself, makes a 2-ply layer, which you can easily use as a mask. Remember, the bigger part of the mask is protecting other people from you expectorating or spitting or coughing and keeping it in there. What happens when your glasses fog up? Well, that's another tough one. In the operating room, I used to wear 3.5 magnification loupes because I was operating deep in the chest. And with these types of masks, they have this metal strip which fastens it up against your nose and gives you some degree of seal. In the worst cases, we would even put chikatpatti or tape, sticky tape, and my mask would have a double-sided tape that you'd put on. Now that was tough when you took it off because it would tear off your skin. But that might be an option if you're wearing a mask to put a small piece of tape above your mask. And that'll not only help you from it slipping down if you don't have the metal strip, but it'll also help you from fogging up your glasses, which does happen on occasion for me with sunglasses and things like that. The vaccines won't get to us until some time. It could be up to 3 months for people who aren't frontline healthcare workers or aren't in the elderly or comorbid group with high blood pressure, heart disease, diabetes, and all that. So I would say in the meanwhile, while your chance of succumbing to it or being hospitalized is low in the less than 60, less than 70 group with no comorbidities, it doesn't not mean you can't transmit it to others and perpetuate the pandemic. So I would say to you that, look, this is no longer a matter of personal freedom. This is a matter of protecting yourself as well as being a hero by protecting everyone else. And that way, we're all going to get through this together safely. When I went to the Far East, to Japan or China, I would see a lot of people wearing masks, and I thought it was a matter of them being afraid of us. In fact, it was the opposite, as my friends in Japan told me, that it was their utmost respect for us that they wore a mask so they wouldn't give us anything. We need to be the same way, you guys. We need to wear masks as a respect to each other, and in that way only, we're going to protect each other and get through this pandemic. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. As always, if you liked it, hit the like button. If you're enjoying all my video series, please subscribe and hit the bell icon so that you can follow it and know when the next video is coming up.